We're going to spend about 15 minutes, like Tom said, because we think it's important. We have not really touched upon social media. And Rebecca listened first to this podcast from Crossway, which is Tony Reinke being interviewed by his name, what was his name? Matt Tooley. And I think it's a really good explanation of what's going on with social media. Much better than having me talking to you about it. So we're going to also have the words up here. He speaks of Neil Postman, and I just wanted to say he was the man in the 80s who was coming out saying that television was a problem. He's the one I was reading when my kids were little. And he wrote a book, The Disappearance of Childhood, which really impacted me. So I think it's wonderful that a guy like Tony Reinke, he knows all about this guy, Neil Postman, but he says he doesn't go far enough, and you're going to see what he's talking about. Here, he's going to use the word spectacles a lot. It's about what we see and about how our eyes are especially susceptible to the spectacular immediacy of a photograph, of a stirring or beautiful photograph online. So we know as Christians that what we see is not what is real. What is real is what we don't see. And yet, what is captivating us in this time of social media and technology is what we see. It's interesting. It's a mind twister, and I just thought that was a really good point to start with as we watch this and listen this morning.
Similar to a lot of other forms of media that dominate our world today, but it also seems different in some ways with its own unique dangers. Do you think that social media is particularly dangerous to Christians today? And if so, what are some of those dangers that you've identified?
Yeah, social media is a new level of media danger, and this is why, if you read a lot of Neil Postman and you read these guys back in the 80s and 90s, they were talking more about television and sort of live linear television of sitting in front of a TV and not having control over rewinding, fast forwarding, pausing it. And so when you read Neil Postman, I agree with a lot of what he says, but he's just not addressing then social media and the new level of challenges that get raised with that. And in my book, Competing Spectacles, what I'm talking about there in social media is talking about this new dynamic of approval where we become both the star and the spectator in our media. We become the center of our media, which is something that's very different than what Postman maybe could have seen coming. McLuhan, maybe those guys could have seen this coming, but it is a stark reality that we live with, that we can become performers before others, and we capture and edit ourselves, our own being and what we say and do. We can edit that and put ourselves before our peers for their approval. Not only that, but then we watch our peers approve us through ticks of affirmation, Instagram likes, Facebook likes, whatever it is. We not only become the star of our own story that we project out there, we watch other people look at us and affirm us. And so we spectate others spectating us, and there's this crazy multifaceted dynamic. It's not unlike first-person shooter video games as well. There's a similarity between being on the screen and shooting, a zombie horde with some sort of a laser gun. You're the star of the story and you're spectating, you're watching yourself. That's similar in social media too. It's just slightly offset, so that we can project things and be the star and watch people like us, and we behold the whole interaction. And that's what becomes very, very it becomes very addictive, that dopamine starts shooting in our brain saying, we want more social affirmation. And so we go back to our social media feeds to project ourselves and to watch other people affirm us.
Yeah, and I'm struck that one of the other differences between, a gaming type of context and social media is that no one, your avatar in a game no one's confusing that for the real you. And yet social media seems to, it's really designed for us to truly present ourselves online as true selves,
right.
As a true representation of what we're actually like in the real world.
Yeah, it totally is. And, in 12 Ways, I share the story. My book, 12 Ways Your Phone is Changing You, also through Crossway. There was a couple of different stories of ladies who, because they were buying all of this fancy sushi, these swimsuits, these different things that they were trying to project on their Instagram feed as, hey, this is part of my daily life, but going into deep debt because they were buying all of these sort of stage props for their Instagram feed. And I assume that's actually not uncommon, that, Instagram is more of a staged sort of performance of someone's life. Maybe not so much edited. I mean, I hear people talk about Instagram being an edited form of people's lives. Maybe that's true. But definitely it's staged. We stage things so that we, present the best side of us, or we spend the money that we wouldn't normally spend so that people get an appearance of who we are that maybe doesn't match up to reality. That's a big consideration.
Yeah, one of the other things that I also often think about when it comes to social media is the impact that it could have on my kids. I have young kids at home, and honestly, sometimes I feel nervous about the world that they're growing up in. Not just the broader media saturation that we exist in, but specifically social media. And it feels like, although I'm only in my early 30s, it does feel like the world today is radically different than it was when I was a young kid.
Yeah.
Kids nowadays have smartphones in their pockets, and they're connected to every fact and every song and every image and every video, and then all of each other as 10-year-olds.
Yeah.
Do you think about the impact that not just the modern media landscape, but social media in particular, will have on kids today and on their emergence into adulthood in the future?
I do, absolutely. I mean, there's a growing consensus of a cultural language that if you're not tapped into that consensus of cultural language, you're left out. So if you don't see the viral tweet, you don't see the viral image, you don't see the movie, you listen to the album, you don't wear the clothes, you're sort of left out. And so we're going to have to train our kids to be like, that's okay. That's okay to feel the fear of missing out and actually missing out. That's okay. That's one of the things that's built into the gospel story, is that we're missing out on a million things a day in this world that we're not going to experience. We can't hike every mountain. We can't see every ocean. We can't enjoy every beach. Every beautiful beach is on Instagram. Well, you might not be able to see every beautiful beach, but the gospel promise for us is that if we keep our eyes on Christ now, if we keep our hope on Him, there is a place in His presence that will make up for every missing out that we've experienced in this life. It's called heaven. It's not an ethereal place where we float around in clouds. It's a recreated version of this world that we will get to explore and enjoy forever. And so somehow that principle has to be communicated to our kids, that yes, you're going to miss out. And yes, Jesus knows you're going to miss out and feel like you're being left out. But there's something greater to come. And that's why this walking by faith and not by sight is a walking towards what is more solid and eternal and satisfying, and giving up by faith all of the things that present themselves to our eyes as being a worthy alternative, but seeing through that and realizing that, no, there's something greater to come.
Yeah, I'm struck by something you write early on in your book. You say, why do we seek spectacles? It's because we're human, hardwired with an unquenchable appetite to see glory. Mm-hmm. Our hearts seek splendor as our eyes scan for greatness. And I think that's really helpful, because sometimes we can react to this insatiable desire for spectacle that we sense in our own hearts, and we see it manifest in our media consumption habits or impulses, compulsions, and we can think that desire is itself a problem. But really, I think, as you're stressing here, that there is something inherently human about the desire for to see glory. But we just need to make sure we're calibrating in the right direction.
Absolutely. That meditation comes out of Augustine's thoughts on creation and glory, and why is it that we're drawn to theater? Why is it we're drawn to the Colosseum? Why is it we're drawn to hunting, to nature? And what he's saying there is that there is an expanse in the human soul that cannot be filled by all the spectacles of this world. If you put every spectacle that you could possibly see in this world into the human soul, it wouldn't be full, because it's made for this divine glory. And so we cannot... What we need to do is enjoy the glories of this world as a sort of a deja vu moment, this sense of I sense the glory, the beauty in this, but I know that the thing that I see is not really the source of the beauty, but it's just an echo. It's as a glancing glimmer of some greater, more satisfying reality, which is God, which is being in His presence. And so we live with that reality of we enjoy some really tremendous beauty and glories in this world, but it's not the thing that we're after. It's just pointing to the God who, if we are pure in heart, we will see Him. That's the promise that Jesus puts out before us. Blessed are the pure in heart. And I think you can apply that to spectacles. Those who don't feed themselves on impure and worthless spectacles. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. So this promise of seeing God, the ultimate beauty, is when then our soul is full to capacity and overflowing in delight, and then that's what we're created for. So every glimmer of delight in this world is just pointing us to that.
Maybe as a last question, as you've noted a couple times, spectacles aren't a new thing. Even just looking at the history of modern media, 100 years ago we had the radio, then we had television and movies, and then the internet age dawned. And now we're into the social media age. Mm-hmm. As you think about the future, where do you see that going? Do you have a sense for what the next era of media saturation might look like for us? And then, what advice would you have for as we think about moving into that era?
Yeah, that's a great question. I recently, just a couple of days ago, saw one of these videos where, it's like NBA playoffs, the kiss cam or dance cam or whatever is, roving the audience. And, the dance cam zooms into, some usher in the second deck, some random guy, he's just standing there, and all of a sudden he starts like dancing, and it's like, okay, that's funny. And then the camera goes to somebody else, and then it comes back to the same guy, and now he's doing like backflips, and you realize like he's a professional dancer that was staged, that was put there. I think, that's humorous. I mean, it was funny the first time we saw it, and now like every team does it. Like it's old. It's like a trope now that everybody does, is sort of planting some spectacle within a crowd and then making it appear like it was a spontaneous thing. That's a funny version of what I think is going to become more serious, and that is the spectacle makers are just getting really, really good at planting things to make us believe or want or act a certain way. And I think as the attention market, as the attention merchants, as they're called, become better and better at sort of staging spectacles that it is hard to decipher, like, is this real or is this fake? I think it's going to just become more and more of a challenge to discern the difference between, like, is this legitimate? Should I be outraged by this? Or did somebody put a whole bunch of editing into this to make a clip sound more explosive than it really is, to gain political favor or to stigmatize a political position? There are things that make me nervous going forward into how media is going to be manipulated, and we're going to have to be discerning about where do we put our outrage, where do we put our support, where do we put our money, where do we put our votes, and not be swayed by the spectacle, because I think the spectacle makers are just going to get better and better at what they do.
That's a pretty, sounds kind of bleak, to be honest.
It's bleak in the sense that the blurring of the line between real and unreality is going to continue to get blurrier. But the reality is that God has given us His revealed word on what is true, what is real, what is substantial, and those things are unseen. And so it really comes back to a question of faith. Like, are you going to live your life based on what you see, or are you going to live your life based on what you can't see? And that's always going to be the tension for Christians, to live by faith and not by sight. To realize, when I'm going through pain in this life and I'm bleeding and I've got Band-Aids and I need surgery and I'm in the hospital, whatever it is, that God is using those seasons of what looks like just a lot of bleak, painful things. He's using that to create an even more substantial thing with greater weight of glory that I'll experience in the future. So what I see is the suffering. What God sees is the thing to come that is going to make up for every missing out and every sorrow and every pain here. And so as the spectacle makers get better and better, Christians are going to have to press into faith and truly trust and believe and treasure and delight in the things that they can't see. But that's always been the challenge. You can read Augustine, Tertullian, the Puritans. The Apostle Paul in the book of Colossians, I believe, is really going against this age of spectacle, even in Colossae. So I don't think it's anything new. It's been going on for millennia. We're just caught up in the latest manifestation of these competing spectacles, and it's more of a challenge because the spectacles are just always in our face.
Well, Tony, thank you so much for taking some time today to talk with us about these competing spectacles that we are confronted with every day, and offering some real biblical wisdom for thinking about these things and moving forward with faith.
We have four people who have been, well, five of you, Rebecca, have been asked to come today. Bob, stay up here. You're one of them. Bob Kelly, he is, you don't have to take these papers, of course. You all know him. He works with our kids at the middle school and high school ages here at the church. Lisa Tiger, she is the director of family ministries. Holly Devlin, she's a parent here today. That is why she's here, is because she's the parent of two kids that are now using a smartphone. And Ben Kramer, who is a high school teacher, Upper St. Clair, right?
Yep.
Upper St. Clair, and he is seeing what he is seeing in the school, and then he too has kiddos. And of course, our own Rebecca Sparks, I know her name, Sparks, and she is an elementary school teacher in Peters. Now, what the plan is first of all, I'm not going to talk about what we just saw. Wasn't that wonderful? I hope you enjoyed it. I just couldn't have said it as well. I think if you're interested in this subject, it would be wonderful on your bibliography to go is the address of how you can get this podcast and bring it up on your own device and listen to it. It is amazing. What would you like to say?
And if you're wondering about the two books that he referenced, I have them with me today. So if you'd like to take a peek at them, you're welcome to do so.
And they're on the bibliography too. That is in the back. Also, I'm just going to quickly say this is a smartphone compulsion test that you may take to find out how you're doing with your smartphone. And then further on in here are some suggestions from Tony Renke about how to get your usage balanced if that's something that you're working on. But let's start with some questions. And I'm going to start with asking the question to Bob. We are very, very interested in our youth here at the church. And you are the one who puts those programs together, of course, and is with our kiddos, middle school and high school. And we're wondering, what do you see in your time that you're with them about how they're using technology and how they're relating to each other and those kind of questions?
Sure. There's no doubt that the technology is there. Most of the students have a cell phone or an iPod or some method of accessing technology. It is neat to see in some of our environments how they set them down on the steps or they put them away. It's not constant. I wish they'd put them away more. We do encourage that at times, depending on what's going on. They are a bit of the technology can be a bit of a comfort to them if whatever is going on is something that they either simply don't want to engage with or find uncomfortable. The technology is something they can fall back to, and I will see them do that from time to time, depending on the kids, depending on what it is. But we try to use it in our own way just by being willing to engage with the students through it with certain restrictions, of course, just that we can't. There are certain types of even social media that is inherently I'm going to use the word flawed, or it's chosen to be that way. Something like Snapchat, which all of the messages are supposed to disappear. That's the purpose of it. You can say whatever you want to say, show whatever you want to show, and then it goes away. As leaders, we do not use that because that's engaging with a method of communication that actually puts us at risk at that point, because anyone could say we said anything that they want to. And so it's just for our own protection, and also just not validating that particular application. But we do use Instagram a little bit, and texting is probably the biggest thing, just between the kids or phone calls. Sometimes the kids will just be able to reach out to us that way. I have been pleased. There was a time that the cell phones, not long ago, a year ago, even 2 years ago, that they were even more disruptive than they are now. And it seems like there's been a bit of a curve in our own group where they seem to either be managing it a little bit better, or they've become disenchanted with it a little bit. So it's I hope to see that more, and even amongst the adults and such. In services, you can see it's not just the kids who get distracted by their phones. I'm not meaning to call anyone out, but reality is they are an easy distraction for all of us. So. Are they hurting the relationships between the kids or helping? There's definitely this whole idea that we've talked about, that someone far away is interjecting themselves on someone who's right there with you. So if my phone were to go off, that's someone who's not here in the room right now disrupting from me communicating with you guys. That's something these classes have talked about and such. So there's no doubt that is happening, and that the kids do struggle with that, because they also want to show their friends who aren't there with them that they care about them. And the expectation of very quickly responding is something that depends on the kid. Not all kids are very good at it, and others are insanely good at it, good being a relative term, as in they're instantly responding to something that comes in over their phone. Others, they might not respond for a day or two because they just don't prioritize that type of communication. And some of their friends will get annoyed with them for that. But at the same time, it is enabling connections with kids that otherwise wouldn't be able to communicate, either because of distance, people who have moved away. Friends don't become when someone moves, families move out of state or something like that, they're able to maintain a higher level of contact than before, although its question was whether the quality of that contact is as good, but that's an entirely different discussion.
We aren't going to let you say anything until everyone's been asked a question, but then if you have something in particular that you would like to bring up or ask, we want to have that time. But I want to we're going to go a little out of order because Holly has to leave for choir. I forgot about that. How about that? So Holly, you have been asked here because I happen to know that Nathan just got his first smartphone this summer, and I know that you all have been working through that. And so I just wanted you to speak about your experience.
Okay. I'll give you a brief history. They both, Hannah and Nathan, do have a smartphone now. When Hannah it was like Christmas time, 9th grade, she got hers, and Nathan got his right before 9th grade started. And I will tell you, they are the last kids to get their smartphone, if not just one of them. I don't know. This has been a long time coming. Maybe since 3rd or 4th grade, these kids have had smart devices, or we call them screens, in their face. And so there is a learning curve, and we're not doing it perfectly, I will just say that, and there's more I can learn and more I can restrict. I think there's always more you can restrict with screens. But we started when the phones were a big draw with gadget watches, and we the gadget watches are basically a GPS device where I could see where my kids were. They could make phone calls to me or any phone number that was put into their gadget watch. Only Nate and I could put the phone numbers that they were allowed to access in their gadget watch, and all of their phone conversations were out loud. There were no private conversations. They hated them. But it was more of a device for convenience for me, with pickups or changing pickup spots at drop-off, pickup at the end of the day. And also, if something changed and they needed to stay after school, they could let me know. Then we moved to flip phones because the gadget watch literally wouldn't fasten on their wrist. And Nathan was known as the flip phone kid. But he was able to make phone calls and contact me if he needed to, and that was the purpose of the device at the time, and that was middle school age. We bought minutes for those phones, so they weren't on a plan. There was no data. Again, they're one of the last kids to have a smartphone. And then they also helped pay for minutes, so there was a responsibility in learning how to take care of the phone and use it wisely. So Hannah is very responsible, but I'm sorry for Hannah, because she's going to be the first example, and she's done a great job. But there have been times where she's like, I need my phone for homework, and so they go up to their room, they're doing homework, and then she makes it sound like it's going to take forever to do homework. We go and find her all cuddled up in her bed watching YouTube videos. No more homework in your bedroom. If you need your phone for homework, you're going to do it at the dining room table. So there's as a parent, you learn what is going to work and what isn't. And so because we learned that with Hannah, Nathan now has to do his homework at the dining room table also. They also had to earn the money to pay for their smartphone, and they're not cheap. We did not buy our kids their smartphone. We just thought, if they're going to get this expensive device and we're going to expect them to be responsible for it, then they're going to have to pay for it. And they did. They worked really hard to pay for their smartphones. The smartphones, or any device that we've had with our kids, we call them screens because the TV's just as bad. It is a draw. I was in Sunday school a few weeks ago, and Louise was talking about what a distraction the phone is just sitting there. The TV is as well. So we just refer to all the devices that are potentially used for entertainment as screens, because there is this it's like a magnet. They're drawn to it, and they just want more and more, and it's never enough. As soon as you turn it off, there's complaining. I have a 7-year-old. And so we're trying to be really careful with the high schoolers, because we have a 7-year-old that's watching all of this. And Nate and I ourselves, we could do better at not being that bad example of always looking at our phone. I mean, it's my watch, it's my iPod, it's my calendar, it's my music. We use it for everything, and so the temptation to look at it is great. Their phones have to be put on a charger in the office at 8:30 at night. They're not allowed to have their phones in their room ever by themselves. No private, we call it private viewing, when there's no private viewing of phones, because there's just so much out there. You've been in Sunday school these past few weeks. When we went to their 12-year checkup, there must be a speech that the pediatrician goes through about smartphones and social media. When my kids told the pediatrician they didn't have a phone, the pediatrician literally put her both hands up in the air in celebration of that. And I was like, oh, that's like a thing to be celebrated. I didn't really know. And of course, it was very affirming as a parent to see that the pediatrician was happy about that. And most of her celebration was due to the fact that social media is such a bad thing for these teenagers. Did my kids miss out? Yeah, they missed out on a lot. I think that it has affected some of their social groupings and made them feel very disconnected, but I've also saved them from a lot of drama, a lot of hurtful words. There just wasn't. We didn't have it. You're going to have it in some degree or another, even without smartphones in middle school, but with the smartphone, it's a real cause of depression and anxiety and bullying, and there's just so much kids want to end their life because of things that were said to them on social media, things that would not be said to their face, but are said in a social media, on social media. Oh, technology at lunchtime for my kids was a big issue too. They were also left out of that. So it started as they had a certain day that they were allowed to bring technology to lunch and be on their device. My kids didn't have a device to be on. So you think you're doing a really great thing by not giving your kids a screen to have in their face. Other kids have more than one, and so they just pass them out. Here, you don't have one, I'll give you mine. So you can do your best as a parent, but it is there, and it's being consumed. And I felt bad for my kids sitting at the lunch table. They weren't conversing. They were all staring at their screens. In the carpool, riding other kids to school. My kids didn't have phones to entertain them on their trip to school, and the other kids did. And so there's no conversation in the car with the other teenagers. It's really bad. And yet, you just do your best as a parent. Like I said to start, there's always more you can do. But that's, you make decisions as you go, and you make changes as you go, and you do what's best for your kids. But it's out there. We also don't allow phones at the dining room table, because it's a distraction. No toys either. So Abby might just bring a doll, but it's still a distraction from conversation. And hopefully I've answered the question that you were asking of me.
We all know Holly, so if you have another question, because she's probably going to leave before the end, but we can always find Holly. Thank you so much. That was so good, because she's the one who's living it right now, and many of you, I am not, and Rebecca is not. So thank you, Holly. Let me go back to church and ask Lisa, as the director of family ministries, about the programming here at the church and how we view screens, technology in our programming, and what you see as the director.
I've had an opportunity to visit a number of conferences and things like that where technology and even social media and things like that are promoted for use in programming, even in our youngest classrooms. The last conference that I was at, they were selling a new children's Bible that has a QR code in it so that the children can scan the code and a video will pop up on the phone to go along with the story. And they're promoting this as a wonderful thing and a great thing and a way to expand the knowledge that the kids will have of the Bible story or the topic that that's being discussed. So where you would maybe have a picture of a relic in the past, now they can scan the code, it pops up, and they can see what it looks like and see 3D images and all kinds of things like that. Here at Beverly Heights, we have deliberately resisted that. And I think that is probably, as I thought about it, to be mindful and to be deliberate. The book that Rebecca has, The 12 Ways That Your Phone is Shaping You, is that what it is? The phone is shaping you, changing you. Is that it is not, the internet is not neutral. These items are not neutral items. They are tools, like Holly said, that we use, but there are people on the other end of those phones that are also using those tools to affect and shape us and to shape our kids. So I think that we have to be mindful of that, and it's something that we've been mindful of, ladies long before me, like Louise, like Alex Fry. When I came on staff 15 years ago in the preschool and helping out in the classrooms. Back then, the technology was toys with batteries in them. And we were deliberate, even at that point, to limit the amount of toys. We might have one or two things that beeped or played a song or made music or something. But for the most part, we have always embraced the age-old truth, and it's still true, that children learn through play. That it is critical for windows of development that the kids have throughout their childhood, that there are pathways being made in their brain, and you can't duplicate on any cell phone, on any computer, what it is to play with clay, or to pour water out of a container, or to try to hit a ball. There isn't anything that you can do. And like Nate talked about this morning in his sermon, if you're not choosing church, you're filling it with something else. And it doesn't matter whether it's the computers or the cell phones or whatever it is. There's nothing that substitutes for the opportunity that a kid has with those interactions in play, with the items that they play with, for their social development, for their gross motor development, for their fine motor development. We just recognized early on that the technology, back then toys with batteries, now the opportunity for a kid to scan a QR code in a Bible storybook is just horrifying. There's nothing that can replace, quite frankly, our kids are delighted when we bring out the flannel board. They're delighted when their Sunday school teacher puts on a bathrobe and they walk around the classroom and pretend that they're walking around the desert like they've been there for 40 years. I think in some ways, those things are even more novel now than they were when I was a little girl in the classroom, because nobody does it anymore. So I think there's tremendous value in continuing to do those things, and that's what we've embraced in the classrooms here. Even in our early childhood classrooms, you will still find a very limited number of toys that have batteries in them, and that's about as far as the technology goes in the classrooms themselves. We certainly have embraced it in being able to communicate to parents what's going on. So like Bob said, we can text parents. We certainly use emails. I would certainly send a video to a parent or a podcast if I found something that I thought would be useful for them. We would use those kind of things. The greatest advance probably in the technology in our classrooms is that we are able to incorporate more music into our classrooms than we used to be able to, because we have music on our phones, and so we can bring up the music for the kids. And of course, music is excellent for kids' development as well, and for hiding the Word of God in their hearts and those kind of things. So I would say that's probably the greatest use of technology in our classroom spaces here, and it's something that we will, I think, continue to deliberately and be mindful about the choices that we make in the classrooms.
That makes me feel good. Thank you, Lisa. Next, I wanted to ask Ben, as a high school teacher in Upper St. Clair, how long have you been there?
17 years.
Okay, so you've seen a change. You've seen the start of the smartphone era. So what do you see there?
Sure. Just a little bit of background. I'm teaching at Upper St. Clair. I teach ninth graders, so they're young kids, 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds. I teach biology, and yeah, I've been teaching for 17 years. So, 17 years ago, even at Upper St. Clair, where there's money, the kids didn't have. Every kid didn't have a device. Now, I can confirm what Holly's saying, where of the 100-some students I have this year, I think all of them have smartphones. All of them have phones, some kind of device, but all of them have smartphones. And in addition to that, one thing that hasn't come up yet is the use of the Chromebooks, or the one-to-one technology programs. Our district, there was never a conversation with the teachers. This might have been peculiar to our district, but there's never a conversation with the teachers about whether we should use technology or not. We've always been technology has always been promoted. So it's kind of exactly the opposite of what Lisa just said. So you may not be feeling good now, but they've always just promoted it. I mean, so if the student doesn't have a smartphone, they have a Chromebook that's essentially theirs. They take it with them everywhere they go. They take it home. My son is in Bethel Park. It's the same story there. He has a Chromebook now for the first time. And so, I'll see him doing homework on his Chromebook, but I'll also see him playing games that he found on the internet that weren't blocked on the device. And it's impossible to block everything. So what am I seeing? It used to be, in the old days, you could tell if a teacher wasn't doing a good job, classroom management, the classroom would be crazy, right? There'd be kids out of their seats. There'd be kids going all over the room. They'd be talking. They'd be loud. They'd be obnoxious, right? Nowadays, when a teacher's not good at classroom management, it looks like a great class, right? The kids are completely pacified. They've got their devices. They've got their technology. They may not be focusing on what I'm talking about at all, but they're dead quiet. Homeroom, everybody's on their phone. They're like zombies the first part of the day. So it's, cell phones are just ubiquitous. They're always there. And if you take the phone away, the device that the school gave them to use for their learning is right there. And, so it creates all kinds of challenges for you as a teacher. You don't know, if they're on their Chromebook because they're taking notes or they're looking at your lecture slides or, they're G-chatting because they all have Google email, so they can talk to other kids through that. So it's just a constant source of distraction. So that's the negative part. I guess a little bit more just negative. Sorry. Just a little bit more, just being real. I also have a unique position at St. Clair because I teach all levels of students. So I teach the strongest students, our honors level students. I teach our still college prep, but not as rigorous, what we call academic level. And then I also teach the kids that have some learning challenges, the conceptual level. So in my day, I see everybody. And the thing that I've noticed over the last 10 years especially, is a decrease in my honor students, my best students. There's a real decrease in their ability to engage in abstract thought. They just don't have either the skills to do it or the desire to do it, which is really disheartening for me. Like, I'm used to, in the middle levels, those students always had some degree of distraction, whether it was the phone or a note that was being passed in class. But in the honors level class, I've really seen over the last 10 years or so a decrease in engagement. The information lives on the screen, and there's really no internalization of the knowledge. It's really hard for students to go there now. And another thing that's becoming more and more of a problem is the students are very reluctant to ask for help. And I've been talking to my colleagues about that. They're seeing the same thing, and a lot of us think that because they live in this social media environment where you're not supposed to show vulnerability, right? You promote the best aspects of yourself, and you put those things out. To admit that you don't know something or that you need additional assistance is a real blow to their ego. So it's kind of like it's keeping up appearances. So they don't want to, even though I'm not on social media, I'm not seeing what they're engaging in, they don't want to be the kid that needs help with the teacher, even though they actually do need that assistance. So yeah, there's just all kinds of roadblocks that have been created. Our district continues to promote technology, as do I think most public schools. We have a platform called Canvas where they want us to stop printing. We're routinely not reprimanded in an official capacity, but we're chastised, to say the least, for printing things for students. They tell us that we should be putting it up on Canvas. They should be reading it on a screen. They should complete the work on a screen. They should submit the work on a screen. And I should be giving them feedback through a screen. So they really, that's their vision. Older teachers like myself are reluctant to do that for a number of reasons. Some of it's just selfish. I don't want to learn some new platform. But part of it also is I found that students really benefit from direct face-to-face communication. So, I can type a paragraph, or I can even do a little video of myself explaining what they could have done better on this assignment. But they can avoid that. It's very easy to avoid it. They just don't look at it, right? But if I confront them face to face in the classroom, I can say, hey, look, this is where you were strong, but this is what I want you to work on next time. And that face-to-face interaction I found to be really, really essential. So those are the challenges. That's what we're seeing, at least in my spot.
Wow. Okay. Make us feel better, Rebecca.
Well, I can speak to elementary school, but also I was just looking at the time and didn't know if we wanted to open up to questions, or if you want me to talk.
Time for good questions, so I think
Okay.
your content.
So I teach 5th grade math and science in Peters, and I'm seeing some similar things to what is being seen at the high school, but the kids don't necessarily have their devices with them all day. I have a couple kiddos who do have phones on them for medical reasons, and so data is being transmitted to their parents and to the nurses and that kind of thing. And the first week of school, it was, a magnet for all of the kids. Oh, there's a phone out. But fortunately for me, they keep their phones and things in their backpacks, and buses is where they tend to have the most issues, and I don't have to deal with that too much. So in terms of social media and smartphones, that kind of thing, at the 5th grade level, we're not dealing with a lot of that. A couple of instances do show up. Maybe 2 or 3 of our kids might have a social media account. And the guidance counselors spend the majority of their day dealing with social emotional issues of kids and what happened outside of school via social media and how that's translating into the school. But mostly that's out of my hands, fortunately. What I do see a lot is that kind of higher level thinking. And like at the high school level, at the elementary school level, using technology has really been encouraged. We don't have one-to-one Chromebooks, but I know when I was in elementary school and middle school and high school, we had a computer lab, and so it was kind of like a field trip to go, where now, at any point, I guess there's 49 kids that I share with my partner teacher, and we have a set of 30 Chromebooks. So as long as he's not using them, my class can use them. And so we have a lot of access to those Chromebooks for educational purposes. And I'm very mindful personally about when I'm pulling that device, and I make sure that it enhances what I'm doing as opposed to just being a glorified piece of paper. I don't have the same restrictions in terms of what I can copy and print, and I still get to do a lot of my teaching face-to-face and a lot of my analysis and working with children face-to-face. The most that I pull in those computers and things is for more science simulations that are difficult to model in the classroom because of lack of resources or size restrictions or that kind of thing. So I like to pull in those simulations, and that's a really nice point. But I think technology has been seen as this way to easily synthesize information. But that's not actually happening for the children. They're able to access a variety of resources, which is something we teach and encourage. But then they simply copy and paste without really analyzing what it is that they're gathering. And for many years, and I have to admit that years ago I was guilty of this too, is, oh, this is synthesizing, gathering information from here, from here, from here, and I put it on this very pretty PowerPoint presentation slide, and here it is all organized together, where that's not real synthesis. There's no depth of thinking related to, that you only get to when you've really focused on a text and spent time with that text. And then you're writing and processing. If you're only writing in short snippets of information, then you're not actually communicating in any real way. And I think that's something that's happening in education, that you're seeing at the high school level, that's kind of starting at that elementary level because of tech. And hopefully I'll see a backswing with that, where people are really focusing more on the writing and the depth of thinking that we're not getting with the text and the screens, because we're constantly being distracted. We're only looking at snippets.
I am sorry. We did intend to have more of a discussion, but then anyway, this has been a wonderful class. It's really just been an introduction to this subject that we, as the Adult Christian Ed Committee, are thinking of having other technology focusing program for you. So now these folks are around, so I think you can catch them at a time that it isn't just before church. So I want to thank each one of them for being here today and for what you do. Thank you so much, and thank you.